What do you do?
That's a good question. What do I do? What do I do? I know. I'm an art dealer. Yes, that's it. You? The articles never say your profession, only loyal friend to the fugitive.
I'm an art dealer, too.
I thought you would be. I can usually tell.
So can I.
There's something about after you've been scruffy for a while, that first shave, you look incredibly clean shaven.
Yeah.
And like your skin has this quality to it. Like it hasn't. It's like a spider's newly molted shell. Like it hasn't hardened yet.
Or it's like the skin of every single character shot in extreme high definition in high contrast black and white, where you could like, my God, like Dakota Fanning's pores are perfect.
Yes. Exactly, right. Well, maybe we should switch the zoom settings to high contrast black and white.
Oh my God. You looked like you just shaved. It looked like you were like, you know what? Chris has finished putting the finishing touches on his trivia. I'm going to go quickly shave again.
That would be hilarious. I did shave this morning. And I had been in the car for a couple of days, and so there was a sort of like I'd shaved the beard a few weeks ago, but as you know from my hilarious mustache photos, which we should probably share with the upper middle brow listener.
We certainly
I did record a video that I have not edited yet, which is it's a one-man show version of Sam Elliott's apology to Benedict Cumberbatch. You know, in which I played both characters.
Where you both parts. Yes. So did you have to shoot all of the you had to shoot all the Sam Elliott stuff first. And
yeah, actually I don't know that I've actually shot the Benedict Cumberbatch part, but I think what I'll probably do is play the Sam Elliott part and then react to it and shoot it that way. That's probably the way I'll do it. But mostly his role is just to be like, "Oh, that's very handsome of you, Sam." You know. I rather think that it's good that you've apologized, but some of the things you said were strikingly homophobic, as it were. You know, just sort of polite English. And then Sam Elliott's... Benedict's sort of the straight man, and Sam Elliott in this skit is sort of like, I do feel terribly ashamed to have used that homophobic language. That's really not who I am, and in fact, the gay community has been mighty supportive of my career over the years, and I hate the possibility I may have alienated some of them. In fact, one of my very favorite drag performers over here in Malibu calls himself or herself, or I don't think it matters too much in the end. Anyway, Samantha Elliott is the name of the performer, sort of a cowgirl thing that he or she does. It doesn't matter. Anyway, it's a great honor, I feel, to have been recognized in that way.
Oh, no.
Did we freeze?
Did you really freeze in the middle of this amazing monologue?
Am I back? Who's got the bad internet?
Well, dang, appears that this here outfit done froze up on us. I see Chris Bagg's face sort of looking up at me, appears to be mighty amused, but I detect no motion. Oh wait, are you back?
That's a good Sam Elliott. There was like a little bit of somebody else in there that I couldn't quite place, but it's like 90% Sam Elliott and 10%, I don't know, like John C. Reilly being Sam Elliott.
Well, you know, often I cannot do an impersonation until I see somebody else's impersonation, and that will give me the key in. Wow. But also, to do Sam Elliott properly, I really I should do vocal warm-ups, because I have to really get to the bottom of the old range here. The old vocal cords need to be kind of turned out and exercised a bit, like a yearling mare. You know, you can't just expect that horse
vocal cord to just get up and jump over a fence without a little bit of a warm up.
I got it. I've got it now. It's 90% Sam Elliott and 10% Owen Wilson.
Oh,
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because Owen Wilson is also sort of one of my voices, and
well, it's it's very lippy.
yeah, and and I think what most people don't realize about Owen is that he is kind of Texan, and in fact, the way I get there is to start with George Walker Bush. Like the Taliban hate us and they hate freedom, and then slow it down and sort of Californize it and make it a little more bewildered and uptalky, and then it's sort of George Bush but California surfer uptalky, and that's how you get Owen, I think.
That was amazing. that was
you hit all my heavy hitters right there. If we could just throw in Jimmy Stewart.
Okay, got it.
I don't do that many of them, but
I feel like I haven't seen your Cumberbatch, but I feel like him, like the thing that I see Cumberbatch doing most, like the word agog is kind of the place where I would start. Like, well, not for him saying it, but like his mannerism, like is mostly of him caught in that moment of surprise, and not just surprise, but also like pretty much all of Cumberbatch, whether it's like Alan Turing or Sherlock or Doctor Strange, sort of the whole performance is like him figuring something out. And, like, you get to watch him process what the next thing he's going to say is. Like, that's part of his shtick, is that you can see the, like, processing happening. So I don't quite know how you're going to do that, but, like, that's your... I would say that's your starting point. It's a lot of pausing.
When I've heard him talk in interviews, it's a very classic cut glass, received pronunciation, English accent, and he's actually quite lovely and kind and thoughtful in real life, even though many of his characters are not. And but that's all I really have. But it's weird because whenever I do an English accent, it always slides north because of the Beatles. It always slides. It's like I find myself being like, like
Liverpool.
That's quite the apology, Sam Elliott.
I cannot do Liverpudlian because it's just close enough to Scottish.
A little Irish,
that, like,
too. Right. That sort of lilting quality to it. Right. All those northern... I
just can't get there.
Yeah, I can't really do it. I can maybe do it in a way...
No, that's a pretty darn good Liverpudlian.
It's the sound. It's it's the sound, like Paul McCartney. We were just, George and I just, we didn't really know how to play our instruments. I just took the guitar and flipped it upside down because I was lefty, right, and, started playing one day, and it was like blink, blunk, blunk, and you had Blackbird, and... It was really quite lovely, but I didn't know what I was doing. It just sort of came out, but...
Are you telling me that Paul McCartney fiddled his way to Blackbird playing a guitar upside down?
Well, he always... He as a kid, he learned to play guitar upside down, and then eventually started buying left-handed... Because he didn't make a lot of left-handed guitars. And he can play guitars both... Like, he can take a regular guitar, flip it upside down and play it, or he can string it and play it properly left-handedly. But I mean, he's like Mozart. Like, I think Paul McCartney is like one of the greatest just pure musicians alive. Like he can play any instrument. Like a lot of the great Beatles guitar solos were actually Paul, and not George. Although George also played some great memorable parts. But
George also has the greatest Beatle. Well, I mean, he's the guitar solo in My Guitar Gently Weeps, right?
I believe that's Eric Clapton. Yeah, I think Eric Clapton sat in on that.
No shit.
I think so. We could look it up, but I think that's right.
Okay, before we get too far down this track, now I have an idea for a bit.
Okay.
Who was the last great switch hitter from the 80s or 1990s?
Eddie Murray.
Okay, so our next bit is Paul McCartney and Eddie Murray
talking shop
about switch
Yeah.
hitting.
I'm trying to think. Was another great switch hitter? I mean, Eddie Murray is one of the greatest switch. He twice hit a home run two home runs in the same game, one from each side of the plate. Which
Both sides.
Yeah, which usually, if you're a switch hitter, you only have power on one side. Like you might, know, and
Yeah, you're like a spray hitter to the other side. You're just doing contact,
Right.
or like
Right.
trying to get a single or drop down a bunt or something,
right.
Or like get hit by the pitch.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Were there any other? But yeah, I do like the idea of Paul McCartney, and the problem is that Eddie Murray is not like a voice. I don't even know what he sounds like. It would.
Yeah.
I don't know how you would do that. Pete Rose.
Oh,
Now that would be funny. That would be funny. Right? Pete Rose is kind of doesn't he have kind of like a Philly accent or something? He's got some kind.
and like Pete Rose keeps getting distracted because like what he wants to talk about is injustice.
Or he
And,
keeps like checking his sports book on his phone. Like
Yeah.
he's got like money on all sorts of games and all. Wait, hang on. Like I think the Steelers are about to beat the spread, right?
Yeah, and like Pete Rose is convinced that like he is the greatest of like his particular, genre, and like is trying to convince McCartney of that, and McCartney is like,
Yeah.
I mean, you're up there, but you're certainly not me.
Right. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's get. Shall we
Yeah,
get
let's
into
get
Ripley
into
here?
Steve Zaillian's Ripley, episodes 5 through 8. We open in Rome, and Ripley is getting settled into his lovely apartment, but only the second most lovely apartment that we're going to see, when a very astute Freddie Miles arrives and begins asking questions of Tom Ripley, very pointed questions that results.
Very English, Freddie Miles.
After like not liking him the first time we saw him, I was like, this is my favorite character in the show now.
Yeah, he is sort of toying with Tom the entire time.
Yeah, in a way that like Tom doesn't ever really get toyed with. And and what is Freddie Miles' reward for being the smartest character in the book, Jesse?
Ashtray to the back of the head, or
Twice.
to the side of the head, I should say. Yeah, he is brained with a heavy glass ashtray, just like in the book.
Yeah. Tom disposes of the body, again, like fairly incompetently. In some of the funniest sections of the book. And now we sort of head into the investigation period. We get our inspector character, the wonderful Inspector Ravini,
Yes.
who begins questioning Tom, who is Dickie at the moment, because Tom is missing, and Marge shows up and like almost foils everything because she's looking for Dickie and ends up talking to Tom. And
Right.
then
And if the inspector realizes that Tom is in fact Tom and not Dickie, then the jig will be up. But Tom sort of intersects her in the street, makes a few excuses that actually sort of, due to a stroke of luck, kind of serve him well in the end. And so that's the we're now into the second episode, some heavy instrument. I do enjoy Ravini. In the midst of all that, the boat gets sold, the catch. 7, macabre entertainment. Tom, as Dickie, finally gets permission from Ravini to go to Sicily. Ravini goes to Marge, where he also has to climb all the stairs and gets very tired. Tom, as Dickie, implies to several a particular doorman or desk clerk, I should say, that he's taking the ferry to Tunisia, and he sort of suggests that he is a bit depressed. And then he, in fact, takes the ferry to Venice. He ditches Dickie's suitcase, and so this is essentially Tom disappearing Dickie and reemerging as Tom in Venice, and leaving a lot of clues that Dickie may have killed himself by jumping off the ferry to Tunisia.
Yep. And episode 8, of course, opens in 1606.
Right.
where we get some scenes of a youngish
duel.
Caravaggio having murdered somebody and then ridden his horse down the Via Appia to take refuge so he can lay low for a little bit. And we are back into our final episode. We're back into present day. Tom is living the good life. He's getting invited to parties. Marge shows up. She seems a little warmer to Tom than has been in the past.
She's getting some notoriety for being the missing Dickie's paramour, and she enjoys that. And getting invited to parties. At one point, a kind of like paparazzi photographs her, and she sort of poses a bit for the paparazzo.
Yeah. Ripley Tom sees the information in the newspaper that Tom Ripley is missing. He turns himself in, and then with like a master stroke of disguise that, might have been lifted from the shot list of the Americans.
I don't know that reference, but I will say, like he puts on a wig. He's now grown a beard and looks uncannily like Tom Ripley wearing a wig.
Like Tom Ripley going to a Halloween party as Caravaggio.
Right. Right. I was like, oh my God, what is this, like Worcester Dinner Theater? Something like. And so, listener, what's going on here is that Ravini is interviewing him as Tom Ripley, and Ravini has interviewed him as Dickie, so he needs to look different.
Yep.
And his disguise, he's just, in my opinion, I don't want to get not very good.
He looks like he looks like a live action version of Fozzie. Like,
the way I was thinking of it, it's like he disguises himself as Euro Tom.
Yeah, exactly, and like speaks with the exact same mannerisms, and like Inspector Ravini, who up until this point has been like the baddest ass Italian detective in a sea of incompetence, just like sits genteelly through the interview, thanks Tom for his time, and fucks off.
Right. No, I was like, Ravini, like, dude, I mean, I don't have the best facial recognition, but if it were me, I would like walk in and be like, and, like, which one are you, sir? Are you Dickie and did you kill Tom, or are you Tom and you killed Dickie? Because I know it's one of those two due to your ridiculous disguise.
Yeah.
And yet it works. There is a little bit of an excuse in that Tom changes the lighting, just like Caravaggio, and there's also an allusion to how Caravaggio's face with two different stages of his life is used for David and Goliath, and so that there's a callback to that moment as well. But yes, Tom apparently gets away with it. He and Marge go to a party, and Marge is sort of more concerned with her newfound celebrity status as kind of like the center of gossip. Tom briefly considers pushing her into a dirty, wet canal, but decides not to do it. And then Herbert Greenleaf, the dad, shows up with his also incompetent detective, McCarran, who, Tom's been sort of salting clues that Dickie and Freddie were lovers, and that Dickie could not handle his own alleged homosexuality, and that's why he kills himself. McCarran falls for this hook, line, and sinker. Herbert Greenleaf realizes that he's been awfully unfair to good old Tom and shakes his hand. Right. Yeah. And so Herbert and Marge are both convinced of Tom's innocence and that he is in fact a good guy. And it seems like Tom's getting away with it until a lovely kind of epilogue scene, which is pretty funny actually, in which Marge has sent Ravini as a kind of thank you gift,
even though she didn't like him.
No, right. Her book, and the book contains in the epigraph, is that the right term, or in the prologue, sort of in the front matter, a photo of the real Dickie, and Ravini sees it and realizes, oh wait, that wasn't Dickie who I talked to, and makes the connection, and then the series ends on a wonderful ellipsis.
Yeah, I feel like Steve Zaillian, like on his way to the editing room, like was like, you know what movie I haven't seen in a long time? I haven't seen The Usual Suspects in a long time. There's that. I mean, I think also one of the things that happens is Tom meets Reeves Minute, portrayed absolutely wonderfully by John Malkovich, which made me incredibly happy. And I love it. It's like, we're doing the Ripley cinematic universe, baby. Like some fan service. Because, of course, Malkovich played Ripley in Ripley's Game, a kind of like BBC production from a few years ago, around 20 years ago or so now. And so the suggestion is that Tom and Reeves are going to do some criminal stuff together. Yeah. And that perhaps if Netflix decides to renew the series, Ravini is going to, try to get Interpol to catch them or something like that. And we're sliding,
set up.
We're sliding real quickly towards Pink Panther land.
It is, there is an element of the Pink Panther, right? Like, I absolutely Ravini is getting increasingly Clouseau-like.
Yes.
And he has a little, I mean, he's an interesting character, but maybe we should I actually wanted to start by playing some audio.
I'm so happy you're continuing to bring these things. I think, I've got some guesses about our particular different personas that we're going to play in this episode, but I'm very happy to listen to more of Ripley.
Well, sounds great. I have 2 clips overall. This is one I just wanted to start with. Here we go. Okay, so this is in, I think, episode 7 or maybe 6. This is when Ravini goes, I think it's 7. This is when Ravini goes to visit Marge in the little town, which is not Mongibello, it's some other little town. I forget the name of it. Atrani, right? And
so many steps.
Right, exactly. And so this is actually like the first thing you see is this wonderful Caravaggio-like image of Marge sleeping with the light playing on her and some bells ringing. So this will echo the sound that I shared last time, which is part of the question that I have for you. But here we go. Marge's sink is full of dirty dishes, and the faucet is dripping. Ravini, I think, starts walking up the steps. Now he's at the little shrine.
Slows down. He's out of breath.
Really out of breath. Now we're up near the villa.
Signorina Sherwood?
Sì?
Sono l'ispettore Pietro Ravini, della Polizia di Roma.
Sì?
Posso entrare?
Sì?
Grazie.
The compressor in the icebox.
Shots in the last few episodes.
Yep. She's about to crack the ice tray.
Ice?
Ice? No, thank you.
Question mark.
Ravini's sort of looking at the art. At one point he sees the portrait, the really bad portrait of Marge, and sort of grimaces.
That's a book I'm writing.
A book? You're not, huh?
Yes.
A book about?
A Johnny.
Oh. I may sit.
Yes.
You knew Signor Malaise.
Yes. He was a friend of Dickie's, really, but mine too.
Who?
What?
Dicky?
Dickie, Greenleaf? Richard? You've spoken to him, haven't you?
Dicky.
And he writes down Deekee in his notebook.
Geeky.
So my question for you out of that excerpt
Yes.
is, what are we doing? Like, why does Ravini get 3 minutes to get to Marge's apartment before the actual plot stuff?
Yeah.
Where he starts questioning her about, her relationship to Freddie Miles and Diki kick off.
Ooh, okay. Let's see. I think I have two answers. One is my cynical answer, and I suspect it's the correct answer, but
Sure.
maybe not. And then I have a second answer, which is basically similar to something we kind of talked about last time, the nature of which is like Steve Zaillian is doing something that we're not picking up on, and it's very subtle. And I think he can't help himself where beauty is concerned. And I wouldn't mind the way I think I would enjoy interfacing with this vehicle is I wouldn't mind seeing still photographs that were pulled from the production with just the background noise of characters walking places and listening to Italy. Like if at Christmas next year, instead of a Yule log playing on my monitor in a fake fireplace, I want still shots from Ripley and the soundscape from Ripley to be playing the entire time. It's going to be a very gloomy Christmas, and I'm going to be so happy. But that's what I like about this. I like the visual, and seriously, I could listen to Ripley and Ravini walk up and down stairs with Steve Zaillian soundscapes all day long, because I think they're beautiful and lovely, but I don't care about the action the way that it's being presented. And I've got a lot of questions for you that are essentially, what are we doing?
Yeah. Well, what's the cynical
And-
answer? And I'll give you because as you were talking, I came up with a defense.
Got it. Great. My cynical answer is that he can't help himself, and that this is actually not a very good work of creation. And have you finally gotten to go? Have you taken yourself to see the new Dune movies yet?
Only the first one.
Okay. Oh, but you have seen the first one. Okay. My critique for the first one is similar to my critique of Ripley, is that it is a beautifully rendered and pretty narratively dead thing. I think there's some interesting moments where I think Denis Villeneuve does some incredibly beautiful things that are affecting in interesting ways. But I think overall, it functions as a very well executed music video that doesn't touch me in any way whatsoever.
Okay. So here is maybe the justification for this scene and this pacing is that I think it's a plausibility gambit on the part of Zaillian. I think what he's doing is fatiguing Ravini so that he falls for the ruse. He's basically saying, look at all this crap this inspector has to pay attention to and deal with. Like, you know, he has to drive all the way to Etrani, and then he has to go looking for Marge, and she doesn't have parking. And I also think part of what's happening too is we're also seeing what he's paying attention to, and he's creating a story about Marge that in the end, part of how Tom gets away with it is he creates the idea in Ravini's mind that Marge is a jealous lover and unreliable. And also that Dickie and Marge are not as close as Marge claims that they are. And that, in fact, Dickie is sort of hiding out from Marge. And so that when Marge, you know, is sort of has a hard time believing that maybe Dickie is the murderer and other things like this, Tom, as Dickie, has created this idea that Marge isn't entirely rational and likes Dickie more than Dickie likes her and doesn't realize that. And I think that a lot of what this is doing is sort of taking us on Ravini's slow journey to that realization. And that includes like a little bit of annoyance at having to climb all these goddamn steps to see this baddie woman who has these terrible paintings in her apartment, which is, by the way, not very well picked up. And I think it's all done to kind of like explain why Ravini is discrediting Marge. So that's my plausibility defense. I certainly think you're right that he can't help himself in terms of beauty, but I also think a little bit of that's going on too.
Yeah, I can buy that for sure. And we even get later on when we get Caravaggio Ripley, Fozzie Ripley talks about Etrani, and we get the same scene, like word for word, where, you know, like Ravini is like, my wife is from Etrani. But this time he says so many steps.
Right. And he has said something similar about Cortina to Tom as Dickie earlier, which is, it's one of those things that's also demonstrating that Tom is smarter than Ravini, because we see that he's using this manipulative ruse and that Tom sees through it. Yeah, you know, I also think part of what's going on here, and maybe this is what I do sort of like about the second half in general, is that I think we're grounding the audience into kind of like how low tech 1955 Italy is. And because Tom could not get away with what he's doing today. People would know what Dickie Greenleaf looks like. You know, the newspaper photos don't have a photo of the missing American Tom Ripley or the missing American Dickie Greenleaf. Like they don't have photos in the newspaper. And so I think part of what he's doing is saying, like, if you have to talk to a suspect, you have to haul your ass out to Etrani, like either by train or motor car, and then climb up the steps. And I think part of what it's doing is reinforcing that this is a world where it's maybe a little bit easier to get away with murder because there's less surveillance, there's less technology, and that detective work just requires more shoe leather, you know, literally.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think one of my favorite moments is you're in Venice. Yeah. I'll be there this evening. And I'm like, oh my God, he just got back from Palermo. And, you know, I mean, yes. And of course it is probably, you know, weeks later or something like that. You know, like, I think you're right, but also like there is this big hole in this whole thing about why is everybody so much more credulous than Tom? You know, it's like it's one of those things where, and this kind of gets into one of my questions for you today. So, you know, you and I have now experienced this work in several different ways. We're both fairly obsessed with it. We've followed Ripley. We've watched the Minghella. We've read the book. We've talked about it. I want you to try to imagine that you have experienced none of that. Like, do you think for an audience that is new to Tom Ripley that this hangs together a little bit better?
Oh, maybe. That's an interesting thought. Because this complaint that I have, I agree with you. I think in this particular second half, he gets away with it too easily, which is the same complaint I have with the novel. I enjoy the cat and mouse of it. I just think it should be harder, and Tom should have to be smarter. And
right. He shouldn't be like a bobcat that is sort of batting around like several mice that have already been sent through like a research project.
Like exactly. I think I think if this thing works as well as Zaillian envisions it or Highsmith envisions it, we're supposed to see Tom as very cleverly creating these narratives without appearing to do so that play upon the characters' prejudices that they fall for. So the idea that like, oh, Tom never says Dickie and Freddie were lovers. Tom never says, I think Dickie was depressed and wanted to commit suicide, but he leaves all these clues to that effect. And he's playing on two dominant prejudices of the era, which are homophobia and sexism. And I think that idea could work. It's just not quite executed enough. But maybe I'm primed to think that because I had the same complaint with the book. Although I just kind of feel like anybody who sees Euro Tom, like Caravaggio Tom, is going to have our react. Like, come on, that's a terrible disguise. And like maybe you forget like, okay, 6 weeks have gone by or something like that. Maybe, you know, and maybe part of what I'm talking about earlier in terms of fatiguing Ravini is that he has seen so many different people that at this point he doesn't know who is who. But like, I don't know. I feel like it's a really good question. I don't know the answer to it. Maybe it does hold together a little bit better if you don't know what's going to happen, because there are some satisfying moments of suspense and relief.
Which ones? Which is the most suspenseful moment of the entire? Well, the second half of the series.
Okay. Well, let me think about that. I mean, certainly like the anticipation of Ravini coming to Venice is a nice beat. I don't like how it's resolved, but I like the, like, I'm coming tonight. And I like Tom having to sort of figure out a solution to that. I even like the idea of that going back to Caravaggio. I just think they need to, like, I hope I don't run into like Zaillian's makeup person here in LA and offend that person. I'm sure they're really good at their job. Maybe it was supposed to be kind of clumsy.
This is my question. This is one of my questions. One of my other questions for you is like, what is going on? Like, what genre are we in? Is it suddenly camp?
Yeah, it felt like, that way at that moment. Yeah.
The Caravaggio scene really feels like camp with like a touch of like horror.
Yeah. I sort of enjoyed that, I think, but like, maybe just because it was beautiful. I liked the McCarran sort of like, you know, the build up to those confrontations I think is pretty good. You know what I really, really like in the second half? I like the guy who saw Freddie and Tom like coming in. His interview with Ravini was great. Actually, this is one of the questions I have for you too. And I love the desk clerks. And maybe that's that scene, the one with the guy who's walking the dog who comes in, and he and Ravini have this weird like glowering like tension. He's like, I don't, you know, like they're kind of pissed at each other, and we don't quite know, but it seems like it's like an Italian macho thing that they're kind of like, oh, I didn't see his face, it was dark. Come on, like, yeah, my dog's.
I'm walking my dog. He goes to the bathroom more than average dogs.
I took Enzo home. I thought you were Enzo. I am Enzo. My dog's Enzo too. Yeah, and it's a little bit comical, but actually wanted to ask you, because this is one of my favorite parts. What do you think the casting process was like for the desk clerks and for the witness?
Okay, let's see. Okay. All right, do it again. So, like, that was great. That was a great take, Desk Clerk 4. I forget your name, but that was good. So what I want you to do this time. So, Victorio. Yeah. Bono. So I want you to portray that you know everything, but these stupid detectives and rich people are just fucking out to lunch, and they are idiots. And you know what? So I just want you to convey that. I want you to convey this, like, somewhat, I can't really speak up for myself because, like, I'm just a desk clerk and I'm not, I'm lower class, and, like, I've got some ideas about psychology, but, like, I just want you to convey all that. Do you think you can do that, Victoria?
Okay, I'll try. Inspector, if you ask me, I think he was depressed. How was that?
That was great.
I also, like, but how do you think they even found them? Like, what would the casting sheet look like? Like, we want somebody with a very memorable face. Like, they all... Yep. And the other thing is, like, there were at least 3 in the second half, and one of them was, like, the really friendly one who kind of, like, helps Tom sneak past the cops. The other one is the one who's sort of like, I know what you're up to, sir. And like, who's very suspicious and, like, holds his passport a little bit too long before handing it back.
Loved that guy and loved his performance. That was some of my favorite tension.
Yeah.
Him.
Yeah, and also in the first half, the desk clerk in San Remo was really good. Yeah, and I also wonder, like, I mean, maybe we could look them up, but I have I'm wondering, like, are they all sort of, like, kind of successful Italian character actors on, like, Italian TV? They have kind of, there's a gravitas to them. My sense is that they've been around the block when it comes to acting. Like, these are, but they're not, I don't think they're famous. I have this sense of, like, good working actors who, if you watched a lot of Italian TV, you'd be like, oh yeah, that guy was the police sergeant from, like, Il Polizia di Venezia, or something like that.
Yeah, he's had like 17 different roles on Italian NYPD
Right, yeah,
Blue.
Exactly, yeah, or like Italian, like, Roma Fire Department.
Naples 4.3.
Another pizza place is burning down. Naples 4.3. CSI Amalfi.
Nothing gets solved ever. I mean, so the problem with, like, Ravini eventually, like, sort of being worn down by this is that he's also the one who is, like, berating, like, we see Ravini as, like, the ultimate inspector, and he even berates the other inspector for not doing his job properly. And so, like, this show is full of, like a few too many incongruencies.
Yeah, it's the same complaint I had about the performances of Dickie and Marge in the first 2 episodes, which in both cases I think it gets better. But in Ravini's case, I feel like he starts out well attenuated and then becomes increasingly Clouseau-like. It's like he becomes more of a comic character as time goes by. Yeah. And he I do think his performance is good, and I don't think I would blame the actor. I think this is a writing and direction sort of thing where it's like, Zaillian can't decide whether he wants Ravini to be a total badass and scary, or if he wants to just sort of play a few of these moments for comedy. And certainly, like, the more comic and incompetent Ravini and McCarran get, the more that is in line with Highsmith's book. But again, that was one of my complaints. I was like, we should really feel like one of these guys is going to catch him. And, like, as sloppy as Tom was, they should have caught him. Like, Tom should have had to up his game a little bit. In the book, at least he dyed his hair when he was Dickie, so he could undye it when he was Tom. But, like, in the TV series, he looks just like Tom Ripley when he's being Dickie, which is like, you don't think you're ever going to run into any... And maybe not, because maybe Tom isn't thinking ahead. Like, maybe he thinks he's going to be Dickie the rest of his life. I don't know. Tom is, I do think one thing about his character is that he's very comfortable with improvisation. He's very comfortable with, like, I'll figure it out, when the time comes.
Well, something you just said about, like, letting the characters fulfill the stereotypes of the era, like really fits with Highsmith, and also like really fits in the moment where Tom should get caught, which is when Marge finds the ring. And Tom sort of, I think, kind of grasping at straws, says, well, he gave it to me, and he hasn't totally fully formed where he's going yet, but Marge fills in the blanks. And yeah, but I think you're right. I think it's a writing and directing problem. I don't think Zaillian really knows what he wanted to do.
And Minghella fixed it in his version by basically having Marge figure it out and then having everybody else dismiss her because she's a woman, which makes you're being hysterical, Marge. And that's sad, and that's true. And in this case, I think that's sort of gestured at, I was alluding to the homophobia earlier and the sexism, but I think it's underplayed a little bit. And I think, Zaillian's a great director and a great writer. He's aiming for masterpiece and in my opinion, arriving at quite good, and
quite good, but also sliding dangerously towards quite bad. Like, I should not be thinking Pink Panther.
Yeah. No, I laughed when I saw Tom's disguise. I laughed at and I should not. That should not be laughable.
And my joke about The Usual Suspects, like I was like, it's like if in The Usual Suspects, Kevin Spacey is playing Verbal Kint and is like, well, gosh, I don't know if I should go anymore. I know that we don't spoil things.
Oh, yeah. That's up to you. Listener.
I think I can do this. I think I can do this.
Skip ahead 2 minutes if you don't want to hear how The Usual Suspects ends.
Okay. I think I can do this without spoiling too much. Like, I imagine in Steve Zaillian's version of The Usual Suspects, he's like, well, what if Verbal like gets up to go to the bathroom and like on his way back from the bathroom, like grabs a cigarette and some glasses and like comes in and sits down and starts speaking in an Eastern European accent, thinking that he's just going to have one over on Chaz Palminteri. Like, that's what it felt like to me, that he wanted some sort of, and we even get the very similar quick cuts of like evidence and like the close up on Ravini's face in almost the same exact shot of Chaz Palminteri's face at the end of The Usual Suspects. But it is completely devoid of any of the tension of The Usual Suspects, because the tension has been let out of the show. Like about earlier that episode.
Yeah. Well, I think part of what's going on there is the dynamics of a limited run series is you want to get picked up for the next season. And so maybe the audience of that last scene is the VP of content at Netflix who makes that decision. He's basically saying like, wouldn't this be fun? Ravini and Malkovich, like, running around Europe, chasing after each other. Don't you want that? Like, you can almost picture it.
I think you're right.
And
I think you were dead on. And I am, I mean, I want more Ripley, but I don't want this Ripley.
All right, I have an adjacent question then. You've queued up an adjacent question for me. So I'm going to play some audio again and then ask the question.
Awesome.
All right, so I got to go to advanced, share sound, back to basic.
Okay.
And then I got to go here. All right, here we go. Okay, so Tom has been invited to a party where people are speculating and taking a lot of pleasure in speculating as to where Dickie is and what's happened to him. Tom says, I'm sure he's just painting in France somewhere. He's a painter. And then this happens.
È un bravissimo pittore. Ha studiato con Di Massimo.
Wow.
Mi ha fatto un ritratto.
Sarei molto interessato a fargli da gente. Soprattutto se ha ucciso Miles. A quel punto la quotazione dei suoi quadri andrebbe alle stelle.
That's the art dealer saying, I hope he killed Freddie Miles because then his art would be worth more money.
Scusate.
Tom's kind of disgusted by that.
Che storia.
It's all very boring, isn't it? So much money and so little else. I just come for the Chateau Margaux. Don't tell anyone. Reeves, mine it, please.
Tom.
Oh, yes, anyway. Have you met our host, the Count?
Just to say hello.
He raises cars. The Contessa produces films. In other words, they do nothing. You're the new blood their anemia needs. You're from New York,
Yeah.
but now you live in Italy.
I keep a place in Venice. You?
When I'm not somewhere else, yes. At the moment, yes.
What do you do?
That's a good question. What do I do? What do they do? I know. I'm an art dealer. Yes, that's it. You? The articles never say your profession, only loyal friend to the fugitive.
I'm an art dealer, too.
I thought you would be. I can usually tell.
So can I.
Well, if you would ever like to discuss, say, art, give me a call. Now I must mingle the price of the wine. Pleasure to meet you, Tom.
The card that Reeves gives to Tom just says Venice and a phone number.
And he's pulled it from his card carrier of a series of other cities,
Right.
St. Petersburg, all with the same, just a single number.
So here's my question for you, which is, when we talked about the novel, you talked about how much you disliked Tom Ripley. And I have said he is objectively a bad person who I wouldn't want to meet in real life, but when I'm doing sort of fantasy, when I treat this novel as a fantasy, I find it kind of fun to relate to his hijinks. I think if there's a scene in this entire thing that would recruit you into my sort of perspective, it would be this one. And I'm curious, did it do that?
Yes, absolutely. And it allows me to make another allusion to the most recent Dune film. There's sort of a joke casting.
I believe this has been spoiled. I believe.
Yes.
I believe this has already been spoiled.
Yes, Christopher Walken as intergalactic emperor.
It's hard to do Walken after hearing Malkovich.
Yes, it is.
Both similarly idiosyncratic in different but related ways.
How about that second? What do I do? How about that second? What do I do? What do I do? Like, so
I know.
When you get to see two great actors working together in harmony, something else happens. And earlier, I don't know the actor who plays Freddie Miles, but the moment that I felt the greatest interest and tension was the scene between Tom and Freddie when Freddie is figuring it out.
Yeah.
Because you feel the dramatic tension of knowing he's going to get away with it, but feeling like there's no way he's going to get away with it. And the fence and parry of that scene is sort of deliciously recreated in this, and it's done so briefly that you can see the characters' regard for each other, and it's, Reeve is the one person who instantly sees through Tom,
right? And
Tom loves it. He is so happy to be seen.
He is so seen.
Yes, and yes, like I was like, oh, I'm back in.
Yeah.
And and it just like, I think that, regardless of this series' inconsistencies, and there are a lot of them, like I don't think it's disqualifying, but it does end up making this just an interesting and odd experience. I'm willing to forgive those for the moments when I'm just like, fuck, this is good. And that is one of those moments, because it so neatly encapsulates everything Highsmith is trying to do.
Right.
Her distaste for and like terrible self-devouring hunger for that way of living.
Yes, I think, yeah, exactly. And even the Reeves shows up at the party to drink the wine, exactly. And they're both kind of moochers.
Yeah.
And they're both criminals, and they both have contempt, as you say, for the people who the wealthy people, and they want to be wealthy in the same way. And yeah, I find it very seductive. Like, I want to see Tom and Reeves go like steal some jewels or like do some art heists. I want to see what kind of bad shit they can get up to together, because it would be so much fun to watch. And
Ripley's 2, the next great.
We might get that. I mean, and in the novels, again, not to give too much away, there's a novel where Reeves and Tom essentially pull off an art forgery of a painter who's dead, but who they pretend is still alive, and then they find a forger to paint paintings with his name and sell them, which gets Tom into some trouble when somebody suspects the ruse, and that's the plot of one of the books. And I find that that would be a pretty fun series, if it's Andrew Scott and John Malkovich pulling off that heist, and then maybe Ravini's chasing after them. That could be a lot of fun.
If we could unhook, this vehicle from the weight of the material that it's adapting, I think we're in business. Like Zaillian's visual scene, his obviously his sound ability, the acting chops of Anthony Scott and John Malkovich with the Ravini actor thrown in and given a better script, and also just sort of detached from the weight of the talented Mr. Ripley, both like the book and the novel. And if we got into some of those lesser known Ripley stories, like, there's like the false head thing that happens with writing, where you write your first page or two of an essay or whatnot, and then you realize actually it starts on page 3. This would be a very expensive false head, but maybe.
Well, the Talented Mr. Ripley as a novel is the heaviest of the Ripley novels. It's the origin story. The character, develops and is the same, but the other ones are a little bit lighter. And I enjoy them as kind of, in the same way that I might enjoy like an Agatha Christie novel, as a sort of very much a sort of, what treatment of this particular genre are we going to get today? As a kind of lark, as a kind of a form of fantastic travel writing.
Yeah, let's go on to trivia.
Great. Well, I think you should go first this time. Okay. I think I went first last time.
So Ripley takes on the name Timothy Fanshawe. That Reeve says, I really like this name, in order to perhaps continue the show. So the name did appear in Highsmith's book, but it has an earlier literary existence. Fanshawe, spelled with an E at the end, was an eponymous character in a 19th century novel about a love triangle involving sexual assault by which of these 19th century lions?
Okay.
Herman Melville, Nathaniel Hawthorne, or Edgar Allan Poe?
Thematically, I think it is most likely one of the latter two. I just don't see Melville getting into sexual assault or romance. I mean, maybe he does, but usually it's more like sailors.
Sailors!
Yeah. I'm trying to... Billy Budd, White Jacket, Moby Dick.
Sailors!
There's Bartleby, but Bartleby is also not about romance.
Yeah, it's a love triangle between Bartleby's boss and the typewriter.
I mean, see, Hawthorne, right, exactly. Hawthorne could be, you could be baiting me with that one because of the Scarlet Letter. So clearly he's interested in crime and punishment. And I haven't read a lot of Hawthorne. Poe does occasionally write romance. I'm trying to think if Poe would write sexual assault. Yeah, why not? I'm going to go with Poe.
Oh, it's Hawthorne. You reasoned yourself out of it.
I did. I thought, it was almost like Hawthorne is too perfect. It can't be
I know.
right.
I tried. I was like, I don't want to make this just like a pick one out of 3 19th century authors.
No,
so I did include the detail about sexual assault as like as sort of just like I need to give Jesse some context.
Yeah, no,
here.
I don't think Melville would write about sexual assault. I could see Poe doing it. It is really more on brand for Hawthorne, though. Now that I think about it, so
yeah, and there's a lot of I read sort of the plot synopsis and was like, oh wow, yeah, this is juicy. There's a really cool essay that sort of speculated whether or not Highsmith knew the source material. But Paul Auster, who just died recently,
I bet she
has
did. She was very well.
Yeah, I bet.
And she read a lot of 19th century novels too.
I don't think you could write the way she writes without it, and Auster has 2 books with a character named Fanshawe that is an allusion to both the Hawthorne and apparently Highsmith's.
Oh, interesting. All right, so ready?
Yep.
Okay. What moment in her life did Patricia Highsmith say seeded the idea of the Ripley novels? Was it A, Highsmith saw from her balcony in an Italian coastal village a young man walking on the beach with an air of pensiveness about him, maybe unease. Quote.
As if he were distracted or depressed?
As if he were distracted, depressed, or was contemplating murdering his best friend. B, she read in the papers about a man in Greece who was accused of murdering his best friend, who was also quite wealthy. C, wait, are you still there? Okay, good. I just minimized. She encountered a woman in the Bloomingdales where she worked in her 20s and secretly followed her home because she had the address from her receipt and imagined murdering her. Or D, she was inspired to create the character after reading the biography of oil tycoon Edward Doheny, who was coincidentally Larry Niven's great-grandfather.
I don't think it's A for some reason. Oh wow, you've done a good job here because B is the most plausible one. But C speaks the most to Highsmith's particular, not obsessions, but compulsions, I think. I'm going to go with C.
It is A.
Oh, my God.
But she did encounter a woman in the Bloomingdales where she worked and secretly followed her home and imagined murdering her. But that's what inspired her novel Carol. And not... It may have also inspired elements of Tales of Mr. Ripley, but she specifically said the idea for Tom Ripley came when she saw this young man walking on the beach in Italy.
Which is great. I mean, like, that's so on point with like writers.
Well, it's also like I love the idea of the empty vessel, right? Like what could that young man possibly be thinking about? I don't know, normal stuff like murdering your best friend,
identity theft. And there's this great like anecdote about Virginia Woolf like coming up with like the first few pages of or thinking about the waves, like the first few pages, and like it's just like 4 or 5 pages about moths. And like, you read the waves and there's not a fucking moth in the book. And, and so like, it's just one of those things about like, it doesn't take much to launch inspiration. You just kind of, if you're paying attention, the smallest thing sets off the biggest thing.
Yeah. I think that's right. And the trick of it is knowing which of those to run with and having the wherewithal to run with them.
Yeah. It's like the Tom Waits story about being stuck in traffic and not being able to write down a song and having to be like, just go bother Leonard Cohen.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Jesus. Every single one of
Leonard Cohen's going to get it.
All of my Tom Waits is like all of my half orcs, or all of my half orcs are Tom Waits.
Interesting, yeah. Tom Waits' speaking voice is different from his it's almost like Jack Nicholson. Like he kind of is more nasal than you would expect, and I think Heath Ledger's Joker is inspired by Tom Waits' speaking style. Like,
I could see that.
Maybe Commissioner Gordon will run into an accident on the way to the hospital. Yes. So, Chris Bagg, new question. Do you want Zaillian's Ripley renewed by Netflix for a second season?
Only if they follow the book that you have pointed. Only if they head the direction that you have outlined.
I imagine.
Only if we get Reeve and Ripley off doing hijinks.
I imagine. I mean, that to me, why else would you have Malkovich as Reeves unless that's what you were thinking of or planning?
Yeah.
I mean, there's another storyline that's pretty good too that they made into Ripley's Game and The American Friend, which is that we've seen before too, but which Reeves is also a part of that one as well. But I think so. It's a tough question. It's a tough question to ask because it's sort of like, well, why not? But then like, I guess, part of the answer is, would you, they only greenlight a certain number of series. So would you rather they do something else? But in this case, like, yeah, I feel like if it hadn't been for Malkovich, my answer to that might have been no. I might have been like, one and done is good. I'm glad you did it. It's beautiful. It's an interesting work of art. I'm glad I saw it. But that scene was enough to get me like, oh, I want to see more of these guys. I want to see these guys doing some Ripley stuff. I want to see them being bad. That would be so much fun. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree.
Well,
what is coming up next?
What's actually coming up next, I believe, is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison in our next series. So that will be coming up in about 2 weeks. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Upper Middle Brow is a Small Point production. Also, Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the... I'm going to start again. Upper Middle Brow is a Small Point production. Chris Bagg and Jesse Dukes are the omniscient desk clerks. Music by Ben Pajak and Jesse Dukes. Design and website by Chris Bagg. You can learn more about us and find our listener survey at uppermiddlebrow.com. Please review us in our podcast app so other people can find the show. And if you happen to be part of the Worcester, Massachusetts Thespian Society or Dinner Theater and you want to complain about my disparaging of your theatrical scene, you can write us at hello@uppermiddlebrow.com.
Here I was thinking that you were making an allusion to the great downtown theater group, the Worcester Group, in which you get to see luminaries such as Willem Dafoe pretend to literally eat pieces of shit.
That would be the Worcester Group in New York, as opposed to the hypothetical Worcester, Massachusetts Summer Dinner Theater, which is about the level I thought of like prop and makeup of Tom Ripley's disguise, about what I would attribute to that hypothetical theater group.
I think I know where that theater is.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably, there've probably been some wonderful productions. The thing about community theater is like sometimes you get a gem,
Oh yeah. Yeah. You get like that one community theater that pulls off, our town, and you're like, oh God, I'm not going to be okay for a month.
I saw, in my hometown of Charlottesville, we had this theater. It's still there, I think, called Live Arts, and I can still remember 3 productions that I saw there, like in my late teenage years, that were, I thought, one of The Cripple of Inisham, one of the David Ives, David Ives,
Ives, yes,
Ives, short acts.
It's all in the timing.
Yeah, that one, and More Fun Than Bowling, which was a really, really fun play too.
I don't know that one. I don't know that.
Yeah, I think they made it into a movie. It kind of, I don't know. To me, it's sort of like, it was a little bit like Kingpin before Kingpin, but it was also a family drama. But it had some great bowling content too.
Well, as a reminder, if you needed a reminder after that last flight of fancy, Jesse and I are both writers and editors, and we can help you with your writing, podcasting, or editing project.
Or community theater script.
Yeah. I'm available, folks. You can see some of our portfolios and learn more at our respective websites, chrisbagg.com and jessedukes.com. I could reprise my greatest line of all time.
Go ahead.
How now, my lord? Oh, sad disaster.
A line that is meant to convey great tragedy, but as I understand it, it was sort of like Ripley in his wig coming on the screen.
Yep.
You usually got a big laugh.
How hilarious that line was. There's like 12 bodies on stage. Well, sad disaster.
That you also, you have a lovely face and you have a wonderful smile, and I would feel like you would be particularly good at acting frustrated optimism. Just Chris Bagg with his optimistic face comes out on the theater, greeting his lord, asking him, like, what's up? And then...
Oh, shit!
Everybody's dead! Sad disaster indeed. Yeah, so that was at the National Shakespeare Theater in 2002?
Yeah. It was like early 2002. I was understudying the role Count Malatesta in John Webster's odd play, The Duchess of Malfi.
That's right. John Webster does have quite the body count usually, right?
Yeah.
Like he's sort of Tarantino or Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah, totally. Yes, he's like I know what Elizabethan theater needs.
We need more blood. We need to shoot people in the face. We need women to die. Every era has a Quentin. All right, well, listener, thanks for tagging along. We'll see you at Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye next time.
Thanks for listening, everybody.